Are any of you aware of Disney's stage adaptation of The Hunchback of Notre Dame? Based on its German counterpart, Der Glockner von Notre Dame, it repurposes songs from the 1996 animated film, as well as blending in some banger originals, and combines elements from the original novel by Victor Hugo. By sticking closer to its original ending, it evolves the Disney film from an already awesome but tonally uneven movie to a more mature, grounded, and surprisingly accurate adaptation that no live-action remake could do justice. And still has yet to see the light of day on Broadway. However, that's a review and rant for another day. So what if I told you that DreamWorks decided to give the musical treatment to one of their own 2D animated films from the 90s they don't promote as much due to its dark and heavy religious themes that I also happen to hold very near and dear to my heart? Not only that, what if I told you they brought back Stephen Schwartz, the lyricist for the animated Prince of Egypt and Hunchback, but also his son Scott Schwartz, the director of the English language version of the musical, to oversee the production, and the book, the script, being written by Philip Lizebnik, known for writing the original Prince of Egypt and Mulan and The Road to El Dorado. Surely this has to be as sensational as Hunchback, right? Well, at least this one has a pro shot. Just 6 weeks after its February 2020 premiere on West End, London's Broadway, it was shut down due to COVID and didn't reopen until July of 2021 and finished its run in January 2022. Though the cast recording came out during quarantine, it was nominated for a Grammy and, like Hamilton, was professionally filmed to be enjoyed in the comfort of your own home and released in December of 2023. During quarantine, I spent a lot of time listening to the cast recording and actually got pretty attached to it. I also listened to the Musicals with Cheese podcast episode where they talk about the musical with one of my favorite YouTubers, Sideways, and even though I'm more forgiving towards it than they are, it's really funny, and I've come back to it multiple times.
Just imagine how cool the Red Sea would have looked.
I mean, the curtains were pretty sweet.
But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's get into it. Like the film, it starts off with the bombastic Deliver Us. It actually holds up pretty well compared to the original, and oh right, they're all British, I forgot. It's just funny how aggressively British they sound to a silly little American ear like mine. I gotta give the musical props for depicting the baby killing more violently than the movie, because they brought out the ribbon blood, hot damn. But anyway, you can tell it's a fake baby, 0 out of 10, SMH. And here's our introduction to Yocheved, my beloved, performed by Mercedes Sampi.
My son, I have nothing I can give.
Who, well, has also been Esmeralda in Der Glockner von Notre Dame. She's really good, oh my gosh. I'll make a separate video on the Hunchback musical someday, but when you have this many alumni and this many similarities, can you really blame me? While I do prefer the late and great Ofer Haza from the original with how much vulnerability she brings to the character, Mercedes is still a great Yocheved with the brief time she spends on stage, and the good news is this isn't the last time we'll see of her. On paper I thought it'd be difficult to live up to Haza's performance because of how much I'm in love with it, but I think her musical counterpart is a worthy successor. She hits the high notes when she needs to, and that's great. Onto the River Lullaby. I like the ensemble becoming the Nile. The quick changes from slave to river costumes are impressive, and I really like the choreography of them transporting baby Moses. When Queen Tuya, played by Debbie Corrupt, finds Moses, this is where we start drawing the differences between the animated film. Moses is still discovered by the queen, unlike one of the daughters of Pharaoh in the original story. Side note, I know details on the story of Moses vary depending on if you're reading something like the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran, but I'll primarily be using the Christian Bible when it comes to talking about accuracy to the source material, since it's the one I grew up learning and the one I personally believe in. I just think bringing up these changes is interesting anyway, though I did do some research while writing this video, so I'll bring up other details here and there. First of all, the name of Moses' mother is Jochebed in the Bible when written in English, but it's pronounced as Yocheved in Hebrew, and written as such in both adaptations of The Prince of Egypt. The more you know. Anyway, this time around it's explicitly stated by the queen and her servant that the baby's Hebrew, which the movie glosses over until it's revealed later that she was aware. And unlike the DreamWorks movie where Moses' sister Miriam follows the basket and watches his adoption from a distance, she straight up approaches the queen, which is biblically accurate, and presents the name of the baby to her.
We must find a good name for you.
Moses, Your Majesty.
What does that mean?
Deliverance.
It actually means rescued from the water. Whatever, it's for narrative purposes by foreshadowing that Moses will deliver his people. Perhaps a bit too on the nose, but it gives the queen this little solo that I really like.
Delivered to me by the great blue Nile.
And in the Bible, Yocheved/Jochebed actually nursed Moses until he became older, but obviously him knowing his mother would completely lose his dramatic weight, so the change is justified. Well, it proceeds with Miriam hoping that her brother will liberate them, and by extension the rest of the slaves, and the number ends with the Lion King sunrise, and a final vocal riff from Mercedes. Again, I prefer Ofra's, but I'd be lying if I said Mercedes' iteration didn't give me chills the first time I heard it on the soundtrack. And that was the best scene from the musical. Kind of peaks early, doesn't it? Yeah, and we still have over 2 hours left. There's still things to enjoy, but this version of Deliver Us was the closest to reaching that greatness the animated movie hit. Anyway, you know how I said I like how they personify set pieces like the Nile River? Well...
Watching me pulling away in the front to prove to you I'm your master.
Yeah.
Wow, impressive.
During the musical's first original song, Faster, it's here where you realize that there kinda, sorta isn't really much of a set. If they're not composed of the ensemble members, then they're projected on the wall. At one point it looks like Moses and Ramses, played by Luke Brady and Liam Tamney respectively, are going down Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood rather than an ancient Egyptian marketplace. They even added 3D debris to fly all over the place, oh for crying out loud. I thought the Nile was executed well, but these chariots...
Wheels of the chariot spinning, barreling down from the ledge.
It feels wrong. Even the part with Yocheved and her children avoiding the Egyptian guard during Deliver Us is a bit weak, since they're just waltzing around a human pyramid instead of what I assume is supposed to be a towering sandstone pillar. I mean, sure, West End doesn't have as big of a budget as Broadway, but even a Broadway smash hit like Hamilton doesn't need the most lavish set design. With the blocking and dance choreo on that awesome turntable and the overall high quality of the songs, it ends up not being necessary. But when you're adapting a film with extravagant ancient Egyptian architecture and acts of God, wouldn't you at least attempt to bring some of that to the stage? You can compare it to DreamWorks' only other stage adaptation, Shrek, and I take their set and costume design over Prince of Egypt's any day. And I'll get to the costuming. Anyway, here we have Hotep. No, not Hotep and Hoy, just Hotep, played by Adam Pearce.
God of creation, we submit to your laws.
Which, alright. This levitating thing he does while Moses and Ramses are in slow-mo is pretty neat. But he does this gesture with his extended fingers throughout the musical that is basically his idle animation. On the song itself, it's a pretty rough first impression of the newly added songs. As the guys from Musicals with Cheese said, you can feel the quality dip. Need I remind you it was also written by Stephen Schwartz? I'm not asking them to go all Ben-Hur on stage, even though it was possible in 1899. But there must have been a better way to execute this by at least throwing in a conveyor belt or something. With the power of animation, the crew was able to create the chariot race sequence with a seamless blend of traditional and computer animation with sweeping, dynamic cinematography thanks to DreamWorks' co-founder, the Steven Spielberg, being brought in to say where he would place the quote-unquote camera in certain shots. Granted, you can't do shot composition like that on a live stage, but I still believe there was a way to make it look less blah. Well, Moses and Ramses reach the palace and get reprimanded by the pharaoh Seti, played by Joe Dixon. When Seti first came on stage, this was when I realized, okay, what is this costume design? He looks more like Prince Charming with those epaulets than an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. In the movie, sure, it's simplistic, but that's because the animators are drawing each and every frame of the characters one by one, so adding fine details and textures would be overkill for them, since they're already worried about accurate clothing physics and minute facial expressions. Just look at the way the queen's shawl flows as she moves her arms. Beautiful, isn't it? I tried looking into historically accurate costume design for this, but since I'm no Egyptologist or historian or what have you, all I have is one semester of stage costuming under my belt, so I can try my best. First of all, it's hard to pinpoint an exact historical date when you try to factor in things like the birth of Moses and which pharaoh would have been ruling at the time, because even though we assume it's Ramses with movies like The Prince of Egypt and Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments, the pharaoh is never actually named in the Bible. It's not confirmed if Ramses II was reigning at that time, so I can't say for sure. The history of ancient Egypt spans thousands of years anyway, so I can't exactly point to a picture and give it an exact year or decade the same way I could for 1920s or 1980s. What I'm trying to say is that if I really wanted to be a stickler on this musical's costume design, there is no way Egyptian royalty would be wearing tailored suits. I'd say the ensemble members that are royal staff and Egyptian civilians are dressed more accurately. I do like the queen's dress with the high-waisted empire silhouette and the short V neckline though. At least that's on the right track, but it still feels a tad contemporary. I understand understand that Moses and Ramesses can't be shirtless throughout the musical, though with one of Moses' costumes later in Act 2 he might as well be. But I think if they wanted to do a better job being more accurate, I'd say they could implement more linen textiles. It would be great since it was worn in daily clothing way back when, and since it's a breathable fabric, it wouldn't be as bad to wear under hot stage lights. It would be accurate, and I wouldn't have to stare at sweaty foreheads in 4K, unlike when I want to watch poor Leslie Odom Jr. sing his heart out. For a more specific outfit, they could have worn something like a Kalasiris, which is a basic sheet, unisex tunic. Or better yet, just look at the silhouettes from the original movie. They did a good job of looking Egyptian, but not being the funhouse mirror costumey kind. In The Prince of Egypt, A New Vision of Animation, the film's art book, Kelly Kimball, the first ever full-time staff costume designer on animated feature, states, "Ancient costumes didn't have set-in sleeves. They didn't know how to make them yet. They didn't have trousers because they didn't know how to construct the crotch. These details keep the clothing ancient looking. Let the men wear kilts, damn it, it's fashionable." I really like this movie, guys. In case y'all couldn't tell.
Young princes.
Old priest.
Thank you, High Priest.
Okay, that was kind of funny. And here's our next number, 1 Weak Link, obviously expanding Ponsetti's line in the original.
Our dynasty's young.
That's how British people pronounce dynasty? They're so weird.
1 weak link can break the strongest chain.
I do like the song and grew quite fond of it on the soundtrack, but I was underwhelmed when I saw the pro shot. The blocking for Seti is awkward, it's just him sitting there. Then he stands. Then he stops to yell at Ramesses. Then he stands. Then he stands some more. And that's it. There's this progress shot from the animated film of the moment when Seti dramatically spins to yell.
But 1 weak link can break the chain of a mighty dynasty.
It's really helped me further appreciate the craftsmanship that goes into a 3-second shot of a feature-length movie. Yeah, the Dutch angle is doing a lot of the heavy lifting to heighten the drama of the scene, but there's other aspects too. How quickly Seti whips around after Ramesses' comment of,
"One damaged temple does not destroy centuries of tradition."
His wide eyes, the way his arm snaps straight right on the word weak to emphasize it while he uses his crook as an extension of said arm. It's so effective to both Ramesses and us as the audience that he gives the same treatment to Moses later in the film, especially with how he jolts his arm to emphasize weak link.
Ramesses, please, you must listen.
I will not be the weak link.
I highly recommend checking out these pencil tests for yourself, by the way. I find them utterly fascinating, so I linked a compilation of them in the description.
Ramesses, please, you must listen.
I will.
Seti in the musical could have at least pointed or something, but he just stands there and sings the lyrics to Ramesses. Well, he does point, but it's long after the number ended and is directed towards Moses. Cool. Cool. He even picks up his scepter doing this, but doesn't incorporate it into his body language. Ugh.
But it must be terrible to have a wife who bores you.
I wouldn't. No.
Stop. Don't even try that.
Next number is Footprints on the Sand, basically Moses' I Want song, as since Ramesses is next to be Pharaoh, Moses doubts if he's able to leave an impact during his lifetime.
One day we are here, and the next we vanish.
An I Want song is a number in which a character sings about their motivation to the audience and is what propels them to act upon it. Think Part of Your World from The Little Mermaid, Out There from Hunchback, and going back to Hamilton, My Shot, Wait for It, and The Room Where It Happens. All I Ever Wanted is rather a subversion of that, but a little more on that later. Luke Brady does a nice job portraying Moses' egotistical yet charismatic personality. Yeah, he says,
Like the humblest of slaves, I won't leave the faintest
which, yeesh, but he's gonna get knocked down a peg pretty soon. I do genuinely like the song. I made dinner while writing this part of the script and I found myself singing it. The dance choreo is neat too, though they sure roll around on the floor a lot. Do you think if I auditioned for a US tour I'd get casted? Moses searches for Ramesses and eventually finds him in their secret room. I know this because he says it out loud for the audience.
Ramesses, where are you? I know you're in here. Our secret room.
There's a scene like this in the movie where Moses tries to console Ramesses in his own unique, brotherly way.
Well, that went well.
Just go away.
Could have been worse. Well, you are rather pathetic.
But there's no line from him being like, Ramesses, I love communicating with you in this geological location that we frequent. Based on Ramesses seemingly having no issue climbing up this tall statue and Moses casually leaning up against it, we can pick up this is their hangout spot. It's not until way later, when the dynamic between the two brothers has shifted, that Moses talks aloud about it in order to tap into Ramesses' nostalgia of when they had it all to get him to talk. Since the two are now just in a room, we lose the nuance of that subtext and visual language since Ramesses is no longer humorously sitting on the lap of his father's statue, which feels like a genuine secret spot a young adult like him would hang out in. Ramesses in general comes off as more whiny than broody in this scene, and I'd say that extends to the entire production.
Father thinks a lot of you.
And none of it is good. I mean, every time he looks at me, I can see the disappointment on his face.
The weak link in the chain. That's what he called me.
Nefertari! No, I'm meeting her on the royal barge this afternoon. I'll never be ready in time.
Irresponsible, ignorant of the traditions. He practically accused me of bringing down the dynasty.
There's this moment earlier when Seti yells at him and he cowers toward the ground, and it feels like he does it to get a laugh from the audience, but it comes off as awkward and overdramatic instead. The two are still immature, but there should be a sense of potential for the leadership they will eventually acquire later in their lives. We get that in Moses, but it's almost completely stripped away from Ramesses. You know, the guy who's going to be clashing with him later on. However, we get this cute moment of Moses mocking him with the echoing, "Oh."
That's why I brought you your clothes.
It's brief, but it shows more of their brotherly bond without being explicitly said in the text. There's a small number that's not on the soundtrack, but it's basically a precursor to All I Ever Wanted by using its melody, where Moses hypes up Ramesses for the following scene, and I love the way Luke Brady sings Osiris.
And thank Horus and Osiris that you're his son and heir.
That's all. I just wanted to say that. Oh, and Horus and Osiris are deities, BTW. The next scene is Ramesses going on a date. It's for a political alliance with Nefertari, played by Nardia Ruth. Nefertari actually was the wife of Ramesses II in real life. Well, one of them, and not to be confused with Nefertiti, a different Egyptian queen. We get this overreaction from Ramesses when he looks at her and she's glaring at him and the audience laughs, but it feels more like they're obligated to because they're aware it's a comedic moment instead of doing so subconsciously. It feels forced. Even though they gave her more of a role in this by giving her a name to start off with instead of simply being Ramesses' wife, they don't do an awful lot with her. She's stoic, exaggeratingly so with this body language, and is marrying Ramesses solely for political reasons. She almost opens up to him and hints at dreaming to fall in love, but immediately cuts herself off so we can move on to the next number. Okay? Instead of having her finish her sentence or giving the time from the scene to flesh out Zipporah and Miriam's relationship as sister-in-laws, we instead get neither on top of an underwritten female character. Sweet. Speaking of the next number, this is Seti's return. Hotep turns a staff into a snake. I would say it's too early for that, but this is the only time it's ever referenced. The trick is cool though, you can tell it's sleight of hand, but it fits since it's supposed to be smoke and mirrors in the movie too. And here we have my favorite original song from the musical, Dance to the Day, the introductory scene for Zipporah, played by Christina Lotto, who I'd say is the best vocalist as well.
You think you chained me here, but you're the one who's tied.
Is this my favorite because it's Zipporah's rhythm of the tambourine? Maybe. They're both energetic musical numbers where the female lead wears red, sings about her dancing, and eventually leaves her veil with one of the male characters. Though Moses is not creepy with it like Frollo, I swear. Rhythm of the Tambourine is more pleasing to listen to since Esmeralda actually enjoys said dancing and is more of a party song, unlike Zipporah, who's doing it to reclaim her agency and the liberation of her people, the Midianites. I don't know why she has to be cage dancing for some of it, but you know. Girl, just walk through the bars, they're wide open. Never mind that, go off, girl. Afterward, there's this altered scene where she and Moses exchange some dialogue. In the movie, he makes a fool out of her at the banquet and shows remorse, then has a change of heart by letting her go when he had the perfect opportunity to turn her in. Instead, she escapes and he attempts to stop her, and I feel mixed about this. I do really like the humanizing moment in the film, and I'm sad they removed it, but at the same time, the musical does flesh out their relationship. In other words, extending the haters to lovers storyline, but they do have a scene later building genuine chemistry. We'll get there when we'll get there, but it makes the scene of Moses discovering the truth about his heritage disjointed because his transition to becoming more humble is clunkier than in the film. Since he doesn't have the aforementioned remorse and change of heart, the start of his worldview becoming challenged doesn't start until right before Zipporah manages to escape. Anyway, he and Ramesses have more brotherly moments in their glittery tank tops, which as we all know now was a staple in ancient Egyptian fashion. Moses towel whips Ramesses with Zipporah's veil. They begin fighting, with the choreography being pretty impressive and well timed, and then Ramesses tries to trip Moses. I do like these additions, and I think I'd argue their bromance is better executed in the musical. Not that they didn't have any in the movie, they certainly did, and I say this as an only child, but I sense more of the sibling energy from what I've personally witnessed in my life. It could also be because they have the time to flesh this out. We're at the 35-minute mark. Oh my gosh, how are we only 35 minutes in? And at this point in the movie, Moses is already wandering the desert. And if you're asking me if the inevitable tragedy between the two of them is somehow even better executed than the movie, I plead the fifth. And here's where Moses, who I guess got a quick change while on the run, meets Miriam and Aaron, his biological siblings, played by Alexia, Khadime, and Silas Wyatt Bark respectively. Now I'm going to go on a side tangent, but I promise it's relevant. Sometime before the pandemic, when my friends and I were at Disney California Adventure, we saw a showing of Frozen live at the Hyperion, a 55-minute long stage adaptation of the movie, and with no affiliation with the Broadway show. I thought it was pretty good, though for scenes like Hans revealing his true intentions to Anna, I could feel the actors rushing through their lines, like it should have been named Frozen, the Wikipedia summary, live at the Hyperion. But I have to be forgiving, right? It had its runtime cut in half. But the thing is, I felt the same way when watching this West End production that's 40 minutes longer than its source material. Miriam trying to convince Moses that he's of Hebrew origin is so oddly paced, as if she's racing against the clock to start singing the River Lullaby reprise. When she runs into Moses, she goes from 0 to 100 within seconds, instead of Sandra Bullock's more gradual desperation.
I didn't expect to see you here. At last, this is God's doing.
Out of my way, slave.
I didn't expect to see you here. If you're here, deliverance must finally be at hand. Aaron, I told you to have faith.
Didn't I tell you? I knew he would return to us when he was ready.
Miriam, come with me.
No, Aaron, this is what happens when you believe you are rewarded for your faith.
Miriam, be quiet.
I know how I sound.
May I discuss something with you?
Aaron, please, Moses, you must believe. You were born of my mother, Yocheved.
The scene also takes place in the middle of a crowded marketplace in Goshen instead of a deserted well at the dead of night, so the intimacy of their 20-some-odd-year reunion has been stripped away. That was a choice. Miriam here feels way too overeager, but I don't want to pin the blame on Alexia. I watched clips of her in this lesser-known work of Stephen Schwartz's called Wicked, and I thought she was great, especially her rendition of Elphaba's battle cry, so I think it has to be the direction that is making us feel so off. Movie Miriam comes off as more level-headed, and her lines like,
I know who you are, and you are not a prince of Egypt.
Miriam, save my life from who?
Ask the man that you call father.
are a lot more brutal than musical Miriam screaming at the ensemble.
I know that people are always laughing at me, saying I'm crazy!
What's weird is that on the cast recording, she acts like the Miriam we know.
Moses, now that you're here, you can't leave us again. You must remember. No, now that you're here, you can't leave us again. You must remember. Follow me!
Maybe it's because they removed that little bit of blocking where Moses pushes her away for the soundtrack, but the two versions are in stark contrast despite being the same actor and character. I get that's the beauty of theater, and a line being said in two instances can be interpreted in different ways, but this is just... But back to why I believe the film executes it in superior fashion. I really appreciate that Miriam takes her time before she starts singing the River Lullaby. Even though she's a two-dimensional drawing moving 24 frames a second, she still acts human. She processes what happened, takes a beat, and with nothing but the sound of the wind blowing, she begins singing as a last resort. From Moses turning to leave to the first note of the song, it's 9 seconds. I counted. In the musical...
Hush now.
And with the underscore coming in 20 seconds before she starts singing, it feels a lot more, for lack of a better phrase, staged and rehearsed compared to how organic the movie makes it feel, where the music kicks in just as Moses puts two and two together. But hey, props to Alexia for being able to cry on command. A number of the actors are able to, so color me impressed. Can't relate. When she does start singing, Moses knowing the River Lullaby comes out of nowhere since it's never established he knew it in the first place. At least the bro whistled it in the movie. They also had to make his realization more overt. I get it, if you're sitting up in the balcony, you won't be able to get the power of close-up reaction shots like you can with traditional animation, but him going, I know that song, and no, it can't be, no, it can't be, loses its impact. We finally get another song from the movie with All I Ever Wanted, and yeah, Luke Brady is good once again.
Graceful rooms of alabaster stone, all I ever wanted.
This time around, Moses' speaking and singing voice sound the same, mainly because they are performed by the same guy for once. With Footprints on the Sand being his I Want song, I guess this would be his I Already Have What I Want song. He's in denial, basically going nuh-uh with how they add a single word in the lyric.
I am a sovereign prince of Egypt.
To
I am still a sovereign prince prince of Egypt.
But for some reason they changed the next lyric to
Etched here on the wall.
I personally prefer etched on every wall, but whatever. The musical attempts to recreate the hieroglyphic sequence, but it's nowhere near as powerful as the movie, because I mean, how could you top this? But I really like Yocheved making eye contact with Moses. It's also a cool reveal that she was on stage the entire time, as well as being an eerie reminder that in both Prince of Egypts, they never meet again, despite Yocheved praying that they will.
I pray we'll meet again. I pray we'll meet again.
As I mentioned earlier, Moses is nursed by her in the book of Exodus, and even in the Ten Commandments he saves her, this time her name being Yoshabel, from being crushed. But a detail I've always loved about the movie that makes up for it is when you hear a solo vocalist throughout that's Ofer Haza, specifically when Moses is wandering in the desert and when he returns to Egypt. I always thought of it as Yocheved watching over Moses in heaven. She watches over for a bit when Seti enters the stage, so this moment in the musical is the closest to getting there. Speaking of Seti, All I Ever Wanted gets an expansion as it includes the hieroglyphic sequence to him coming in to say,
Sacrifices must be made.
to even the Queen's reprise coming in a single number instead of being separate scenes. I like the reason as to why the Queen took Moses in, since, to be fair, in the movie, she was basically like finders keepers. After Ramesses, she couldn't have any more children, so she believed the Nile sending Moses her way was a gift from the gods.
A basket in the bulrushes with the most beautiful baby I had ever seen inside.
Sheesh, favoritism much? This is also the earliest use of the When You Believe motif, since she believes it's a miracle she discovered him.
What is that?
Both iterations of the Queen having unconditional love for Moses is really admirable. The reprise is more bombastic than comforting like the movie, since it has to match Moses' crisis of not being able to join his adopted family in the afterlife due to his newfound heritage, but I still prefer the movie's version.
This is your home, my son. This is your home, my son.
I think because this is the theater, you have to be more theatrical, but I also really appreciate the movie's quieter moments. Am I stupid for saying that? I'm more versed in movies than live theater, so it could be that my brain is just hardwired into loving those slower paces in movies, and why I'm not a fan of the musical removing those beats. The number crescendos into an additional chorus, which includes a reference to
From the golden ball.
I wouldn't associate yourself with the golden calf if I were you, Moses. With a crack of a whip, we transition to the crime scene. Get it? Because Moses commits a crime in this scene? I'm so funny. The whip acts as a real-life smash cut, and I think that's really creative.
He won't stop whipping that man! He can't get up!
Do you want me to get him a life alert, or... With his worldview shattered into pieces, we see Moses do something almost, if not never, depicted by a main character in family-friendly entertainment.
I command you to stop!
Moses just killed a man. Yep, I've said it before and I'll say it again. At least it wasn't Vincent Price. The slow-mo effect is really cool, you can't deny that. Moses flees, Ramesses runs after him, and we get another moment where it feels like the characters are rushing to burst into song with Make It Right.
You're not thinking straight, so just come back with me now.
No, I can't stay where I don't belong.
You know I can't live without you.
Back in the 80s, when the late and great Howard Ashman was writing The Little Mermaid with the equally great composer Alan Menken, he was able to smoothly transition from dialogue to song lyrics by having the intro of Under the Sea play under the dialogue of Sebastian, to the point that the change is so seamless you don't notice it. But with the way Liam Tamney is so aggressive with the first word you, it's more disjointed than anything. With their theater background, Ashman and Menken were instrumental in bringing back animated musicals to their heyday, and movies like The Prince of Egypt would not exist without them. It's so mind-boggling because this is Stephen Schwartz writing these songs, and I adore his work on animated movies, who's worked with Menken multiple times, but it's the original songs of this production specifically that have less of an impact compared to their pre-existing counterparts. Not to mention, Schwartz is an absolute legend in musical theater. You got that indie project Wicked, but with Pippin, Godspell, Children of Eden, he also has a theater background. But for the most part, the songs in The Prince of Egypt feel like Stephen Schwartz on autopilot. Well, I mean, I guess the song itself is decent, there's just a speed bump you need to hit before getting there. However, once again, Leah makes Ramses come across as whiny than tragic compared to the way Ralph Fiennes flawlessly pulled it off.
But I will be Pharaoh, the living God, and if I say day is night, it will be written.
I am Egypt, the morning and the evening star. If I say day is night, it will be written.
And I say you are innocent. I say you are my brother.
And you will be what I say you are. I say you are innocent.
The blocking for this scene is also awkward, with Moses and Ramses standing around throughout the number, and with Moses exiting the stage the same way he entered, there's no sense of direction. Is he running back to Egypt? Relax, Ramses, he'll just meet you there. Compare that to the film where the emotional, keyword here being emotional, farewell is at the entrance of the city, with Ramses attempting to block his way and even the animators putting in the effort to make him walk backwards. How did they do that? The scene is also a subtle reminder that they grew up as brothers and that Ramses has genuine love for Moses with how often he reaches out to make physical contact. The first time is reassuring, the second time is to stop him in his place, the third is a few blink and you'll miss it frames of consolation, the fourth and fifth are more attempts at being persuasive and reassuring, first with one arm, then two, the sixth is a slower beckoning, and the seventh and final is when he outstretches it one more time once Moses begins running away. No matter how many times Moses swats him away or even restrains him, Ramses is so desperate for the man he calls brother to stay with him. However, Moses does reciprocate some of those feelings with how he shifts his hands from his arms to his shoulders as he becomes vulnerable for a fleeting moment and reveals a shred of the truth that haunts him. In the musical, they make contact occasionally, but they're also standing so far apart from one another, and maybe I'll give the benefit of the doubt and say it could have been because of COVID, since audience members are seen wearing masks, though it would be unlikely with how many ensemble members are on stage in close proximity to one another. So anyway, Moses skedaddles and we get Moses in the desert. I really like the chorus and the use of the When You Believe melody again. And Moses singing while casually lifting one of the ensemble members looks so effortless. And oh, would you look at the time, it's Midian hour. I've thought this for years, even while watching the movie, and I think the line, "Our Father's the High Priest of Midian," radiates "My dad owns Microsoft energy."
Our father's the high priest of Midian. My father's the high priest of Midian. Big brother.
The girls are Leah and Keturah, Zipporah's sisters, though with the way Zipporah says it sounds more like Leah and Keturah. Whatever it is, Leah and Keturah were the names of the wives of Jacob and Abraham, respectively. It kind of feels like name dropping for the sake of name dropping, or maybe they're setting up a Bible cinematic universe. Wouldn't be the first time. One of the closest things we get to somewhat creative stage design would be the trapdoor used when Moses falls down the well. It's also here where we see Zipporah's more movie-accurate costume, including the addition of a turquoise necklace. We get our introduction to Jethro, played by Clive Rowe, though I prefer Danny Glover, and I think he did a better job executing that wise, fatherly persona. However, it's here where they change one of my favorite moments from the movie.
Please don't. I've done nothing in my life worth honoring.
Well, that's true.
Please, sir, I wish you wouldn't. I've done nothing in my life worth honoring.
We lose yet another realization with Zipporah's jab at Moses, instead of the gears in her head turning and thinking, maybe this Moses guy isn't all that bad. It sucks, but again, it'd be tough to convey that subtle facial expression when you're sitting in the balcony seats. Sacrifices must be made or whatever. Oh, that was terrible of me, I'm sorry. But Through Heaven's Eyes, they slow down the timeline where instead of Moses and Zipporah building chemistry as the song progresses and then getting married at the end, Zipporah is hostile toward Moses as the song progresses, and then at the end she's like, "Wait, you learned to dance? Oh, I guess you're hot now." Moses is a shepherd now, and damn it, he and Zipporah have cute chemistry.
Zipporah's nosing the ewes back to the center of the flock.
There's a sheep named after me.
Well, how do you know? It's not the other way around.
A sheep?
She is bossy, and she's courageous and smart. She's my favorite.
I find the humor in the musical to be hit or miss, but when it is funny, chances are it's coming from Luke Brady.
Come, Moses, join the dance.
Well, I can't do that.
Do you feel the same way about people?
Sheep are simpler. It's good to have people close to you who will question your decisions.
How are we going to cross it without ships?
I didn't mean question my decisions right now.
I won't deny that it's a bit of a shame Zipporah gets sidelined during the second half of the movie. That's really because it's focusing on the relationship between Moses and Ramesses and those 10 little plagues of Egypt instead. But I'd say the musical does a great job of expanding upon their relationship, and I could imagine there was a scene like this in the Through Heaven's Eyes montage. We get more biblical name drops, with the sheep being named after other figures like Dinah, the daughter of Leah and Jacob, Sarah, wife and half-sister of Abraham, Micah, the 6th of the 12 prophets in the Hebrew Bible, and Daniel, who survived the lion's den. We even get a Moses and Zipporah duet with Never in a Million Years that I like too. It's nice that they get a love ballad together. Oh, and this scene happens.
The ram, he's making a move. He's walking towards her.
Oh.
I think you may have an addition to your flock in a few months.
Anyway, Daniel ran off and Moses needs to get him back. Silly Daniel, always ending up in caves. And here we have the Act 1 finale.
Our people and our dynasty.
Well, R.I.P. you genocidal bozo. We can't worry about that though. Moses has to encounter the burning bush. Which...
Who are you?
That's not how monotheism works, guys. The directors of the original film almost made this mistake until they caught themselves, as they explain in the commentary track.
That was one of the biggest challenges we had on the movie, was finding what the voice of God was going to be. So we thought, let's put all the voices in of all the people in his life.
There was also that problem that it did sound like a whole pantheon of gods, and one of the sort of themes of the story is that there is actually only one God.
And according to the art book, by making the voice of Moses, Val Kilmer also voice God, it leans into the idea of the Kabbalah, a Jewish esoteric method that one who hears God hears him in their own voice. By making God this Greek chorus in the musical, you are entirely missing the point and foundation of the Abrahamic religions, and it's that we only believe in one God. Besides, it's meant to contrast the Egyptians' polytheistic beliefs. In that commentary clip, you may have heard Hans Zimmer's beautiful burning bush theme, and I hate to break it to you all, they don't use it one bit in the musical. I noticed that in the soundtrack, and I thought it'd be used as an overture in the pro shot. Nope. No. While I do somewhat like that God's... communicate with Moses with the Deliver Us motif, what was once an ethereal, otherworldly encounter with the stern but loving and comforting God with the gorgeous becomes a stereotypical, bombastic God sequence we've seen countless times before in media. The burning bush is considered a highlight in the original film because it subverts previous iterations. The leitmotif is used whenever one of God's miracles are present, but instead of this dazzling piece that's at their disposal, the musical reuses previous ones we've already heard, like Deliver Us in this scene, and spoilers, later when the Nile turns into blood, and even the river lullaby during the parting of the Red Sea, making the musical language feel muddled with how they use the same cues for scenes that don't correlate with one another. Also, they get their testaments mixed up for a second and turn them into Jesus. Okay. However, aside from that, this Act 1 finale is pretty nice, drawing the parallels of the paths Moses and Ramesses have chosen for their lives, with Ramesses being crowned pharaoh and Moses marrying Zipporah before they leave to free the Hebrews. From first kiss to marriage happening on the same day feels unbelievably fast, but okay. Also, I can't be the only one who thinks Ramesses' crown makes him look like Crow from Mystery Science Theater 3000, right? Though I will say, Moses and Ramesses singing as a round is great. Maybe it's because they're singing with a motif I've known practically all my life, but it honestly kind of hits. I dig it.
Now my life is changing. Will I from now on turn out to be all I ever wanted?
But wait, you're probably thinking, they're using the All I Ever Wanted melody even though it's used during the plagues from the movie. You'll be correct. You'll see. And with that, that's the end of Act 1. If you forget about the God stuff, I'd say it's a pretty solid finale. It's a good point to end on since it ups the stakes compared to if you ended it right at the end of Through Heaven's Eyes, especially when they added more songs like Never in a Million Years and the reprise of Faster, which the ironic but admittedly fitting slower tempo works well in its favor.
Now it seems even faster.
Even though the pacing in general is considerably slower since they're adding so many new songs, it's a decent, albeit inferior, retelling of the first 50 minutes of the movie, guess this time now with more British people and tailored clothing. So now let's jump into Act 2. 11 pages into the script. Ugh. There's not as much to talk about compared to Act 1, and it's either because I already mentioned it earlier or they're just recreating the movie, but not as well. Ramesses' son is born and he looks like the Eraserhead baby. I have not seen Eraserhead.
What is the name you give your son?
Seti the Second.
The dude's throwing glitter at the poor guy. What is he doing? Moses crashes the party and Hotep has to turn his head to purposely not recognize him. That's stupid. Moses asks Ramesses if they can talk in private and he responds,
And I know just the place.
And that brings us once again to
Our secret room.
Ugh, come on man, show don't tell. This leads us to Always on Your Side, another Moses and Ramesses duet.
I'm the least free man on earth,
says the slave owner. The musical is aware that Ramesses has so-called less power now that he's pharaoh, but what's the point of that? To make him more sympathetic? What's the point of devaluing your own villain?
when I grew up, and now I sometimes have to laugh for all I'm worth.
I'm pretty sure the intention for us as an audience is to basically point and laugh at his idiotic mindset, since you can see Moses shaking his head, but it turns him into a pathetic villain. Not the kind you genuinely feel sorry for, but you're not emotionally attached to him in the slightest. And don't worry guys, it gets worse in a bit. Well, we get yet another change in the story, and that is Ramesses will free the Hebrews, but if, and only if, Moses stays alongside him to be his advisor. And he says yes. Well, that was an awfully short second act. I guess that's it. Okay, bye! No, I got more things to yap about. First, I want to talk about Aaron for a bit because for the longest time, I thought they removed him entirely. He's never mentioned on the cast recording, and even though he has a brief solo coming up, I assumed it was an ensemble member. In both versions of The Prince of Egypt, his role is greatly reduced, where in the original he mainly did the talking on the behalf of Moses since he's more articulate. I'm fine with Moses being independent, I just find it odd. Well, here we have Simha, a dance/musical number of the Hebrews celebrating their freedom. Christine continues to flex her amazing vocals. They have a big dance party, and then Hotep is immediately like, LOL JK, we doubled your workload, so there was no point. To make one last Hunchback comparison, this time to the movie, it's like A Guy Like You, which also stops the pacing to a screeching halt with the gargoyles hyping up Quasimodo to make him believe Esmeralda will fall in love with him, only to have her waltz in with Phoebus and start making out with him soon after. Yes, the pharaoh going back and forth on his decision ad nauseum is biblically accurate, but for the sake of a strong narrative, the Hebrews believing they've been freed now instead of after the death of the firstborn significantly loses its dramatic impact. I guess some of the choreography is impressive, but if there's 50 minutes of the story left, why are we wasting it on a dance number we know isn't going to end well? And guess what? It doesn't! The Hebrews order Moses to... And when Moses asks Ramesses, bro, what gives? Ramesses states he felt betrayed, which is valid, but it follows up with this exchange.
Oh, this isn't about you, Ramesses. Everything is about me. I am Pharaoh.
Look how they massacred my boy. Ramesses in the film was egotistical and stuck up, but there was great tragedy to him as well. You know why he's doing this and where he's coming from because you can feel the burden and struggle of him choosing between his brother Moses and his family, his empire, his legacy. But instead...
Everything is about me.
Let's take away that nuance and make him act like a child, shall we? You could have quoted the part from Nostalgia Critic's review of the movie and I would have taken that more seriously.
Kool-Aid. Strawberry. I love my yummy wummy raw blood. Strawberry, Moses. Dork.
Another thing is that with its weak production design, we miss the fact that Ramses' reign has evolved Egypt to a colossal empire more than his father ever did, with him stating,
A greater Egypt than that of my father.
Comparing the two skylines to each other, and that a colossus of himself dwarfs Eddy's statue, it further lifts the film's grandeur. All they have to show for it here are slapping a couple extra monuments in the projections. You wouldn't notice them unless you paid close attention. I definitely didn't. Maybe you could have shown the Great Pyramid of Giza in the background too, but whatever. In other news, they pull the Kool-Aid trick again. That's neat. And Miriam is foretelling the 10 plagues for some reason?
Plagues, darkness and fire.
Wasn't the whole point of the burning bush scene is that Moses is the only one with direct contact to God? Miriam is no longer the voice of reason and beacon of hope for Moses. She instead yells at people and orders them to convert to her beliefs.
God has stretched out his hand and shown his power. You have to believe me now.
Look how they massacred my girl. Oh yeah, and this is when the Nile turns to blood. It's just dancing and projections like everything else. I don't know what to tell you. If the ensemble was just personifying the river, fine, good idea, but the fact that they're in place of every other set piece makes the spectacle wear out its welcome with all the choreo blurring together. If you thought I skipped playing with the big boys earlier, no, they do it now, but it's only the part with the chanting of the Egyptian gods. I'm not super upset they removed the majority of the song. Some people believe it's the weakest track from the movie. I personally love it, lightsabers and all, but considering the quality of the other OG songs, I have a feeling I would have stuck with the film's version anyway. Speaking of which, this transitions to my favorite song from the movie, The Plagues, where they radically change Moses and Ramses' solos, both lyrically and sonically. Instead of lamenting how he hates the pain that is being inflicted upon the innocent people of Egypt using the melody of All I Ever Wanted, as it's the last thing he wanted, he's now singing about how nothing can stop God's power to the tune of Make It Right. Though he has a new scene with the queen which I like. They give her a verse and she questions Moses if he ever loved her, Seti, and Ramesses.
It breaks my heart to ask you, did you hate us all along?
It's a raw and powerful moment, especially with the way the camera cuts to a closer shot when she turns and asks him, but we have to go right back to the plagues. With the constant tone whiplash, I feel like it would have worked better if both this scene and Moses going to talk to Ramesses took place after the plagues, instead of going back and forth and ruining the momentum of the 10 freaking plagues of Egypt. Maybe he had to find her and stumble into her chamber during the Plague of Darkness, I don't know. Well, at least she's still alive, and it's sad to see how much of an impact the death of Seti and absence of Moses had on her, instead of just super vaguely implying that she died like in the movie with her never showing up again. Moses does go talk to Ramesses, but since it's part of the plague sequence, it's not given the respect and intimacy the film counterpart had, with Moses' desperation to reaching out to Moses, heightening as the scene progresses. A reverse of their final time together all those years ago. Their emotions have to match the music, so it's basically Moses going, please, 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 and Ramesses is like, I don't know, and then Moses continuing to go, please, 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 until the spirit of Seti slaps Ramesses on the shoulder that he finally says, no.
You will not give me orders. You will not threaten me.
But I do like the shot of him and Seti's heads turning toward Moses at the same time. Spooky. The entire first act was spent building their bond, but during what should be the height of their conflict of two lifelong brothers being torn apart, it's about as dramatic as an employee arguing with their boss for a raise. And since most of the catastrophic plagues are literally going on in the background, you don't feel the tension the musical is asking you to feel. Although I'm not a fan of the way Liam Tamney portrays Ramesses, I do really like the way he growls the I in I will never let your people go.
Last time I beg you, I will never let my people go.
Really, the only time it comes close to reaching the heights of the original would be with those last 30 seconds where they're just singing what was already sung 25 years earlier. When Cameron was in Egypt's land, let my Cameron go. I suppose Hotep coming up front and center stage to put boils on his face was a nice touch, and him showing more on his body was a disgusting reveal, but overall you're better off watching the scene from the 98 movie. Enjoy the vibrant hues, impeccable vocal performances, Moses' sorrow, Ramesses' anger, the sharp contrast of light and shadow, this one shot that's recreated from Citizen Kane, and 9 of the plagues in all their glory instead of just lightning, fireballs, and some boils. Now would you be so kind as to excuse me for one moment?
You who I call brother, how could you have come to hate me so? Is this what you wanted? I said
We get more of Greek chorus God, but now it's Passover time. At this point, a part of me knew it wasn't going to reach the level of artistry from the original, and I thought maybe they'd do a solo interpretive dance with some long wispy fabric, like chiffon or silk or ribbon dancer, but I guess putting tablecloths on some rocks works too. I like the baby blanket fake out, but that's the best you got. As Moses witnesses the brutal final plague, we see he's changed into a mesh tank top, so he now looks like Doug from 51st Dates. For the rest of my life, it's a solid kind of, but also not really 11 o'clock number where Moses grieves over the loss that he is partially responsible for.
Seared into my memory with a cruel burning knife.
The string section goes off by going as Moses grapples over his actions.
The crimes I do them in your name.
Luke Brady once again does a great job until... well, to err is human. Ramesses and his wife Nefertari also lose their child, and overcome with grief, Ramesses lets the Hebrews go. For real this time, definitely. With Nefertari's ballad Heartless, it works well out of context, but not so much for a character in a musical we don't know much about. She sings about how people call her heartless, but we never get the chance to see that.
I know people call me heartless. Oh, if only it were true.
The last time we saw her have any significant chunk of dialogue was just after Act 2 began, when she and Zipporah started bickering about who's a more legit princess. You know how in Eddie Burback's video about the Las Vegas sphere, he mentions that it looks great from far away, but not so much up close? Yeah. The set really does lose a lot of its authenticity and tangibility when the characters never interact with it. It's like when big budget movies are so reliant on green screens that when you watch a new blockbuster or revisit one from the past that embraces practical effects, it feels like a breath of fresh air. Without any obelisks or statues, we don't get the looming presence of the architecture the ancient Egyptians had specialized in. But hey, I love the lighting in this scene. The contrast of blue and gold on Nadia Ruth is mwah. After that, we get more tone whiplash when Miriam barges in while Moses is grieving and Zipporah has to reel her back.
Is it true? The word is all over Goshen. Miriam, stop. But if it's true, wait.
Oh my gosh, girl, give him a break. And here we have the Oscar-winning song, When You Believe.
Many nights we've prayed with no proof anyone could hear.
Man, do Alexia's and Christine's vocals work well with one another.
There can be
You'd think with how big of a deal the betrayal felt to them earlier, the Hebrews would be more skeptical about them being freed for a second time. Nope. And so the Exodus begins. All 25 of the Hebrews. We have to see them be joyful all over again, so at this point we're just going through the motions. It would hit a lot harder if this was the first time they were told they were free. Yet at the same time, I would be lying if I said their vocal performances didn't give me chills. Afterwards, there is a scene between Ramesses and Hotep where Ramesses has to be told what to do by the high priest. Instead of Ramesses changing his mind sometime off screen and cornering the Hebrews by surprise, creating dramatic tension for them and by extension the audience, Hotep blackmails him by threatening him with his army, which leads to Ramesses deciding to lead them. Totally not because Hotep ordered him to. And the way he states it as seriously as possible makes him sound like a mustache-twirling villain instead of the man with great hubris who fell from grace.
Assemble the soldiers. I'll lead them into the desert after Moses.
We're not even at the Red Sea yet. Oh my gosh, I need to get this over with. We get this moment, however, the calm before the storm, if you will, with the reprise of Never in a Million Years, where Zipporah is lamenting that she'll never be able to see her family or people again. Even though Moses gives her the opportunity to turn back, she's so devoted she doesn't want to leave him.
Never in a million years, my love.
But oh no, Ramesses changed his mind again. If only this wasn't spoon-fed to us a couple minutes ago.
Ramesses betrayed us, it was a trap!
This is the second time you fell for it. What were you expecting? This just makes them look so gullible. But with no other option, Moses decides to do the 11 pose toward the Red Sea. Maybe they'll do something, I don't know, am I right? And would you look at that? Another appearance from Yocheved with her coming in and giving Moses that final push.
And until the end of history, will this day be so?
Ah, she's so good. Some might be upset that Moses didn't slam forth his staff into the sea, but I mean, him stretching forth his hand is more biblically accurate, so... And here it is, the parting of the Red Sea. One of the most iconic stories from the Bible, an absolute marvel from the animated film, and one of the best moments in animation history, period. You ready?
You weren't wowed by the curtains? I mean...
I've seen curtains before!
He parted he opened the window. I mean...
Doesn't quite feel the same with the... You know? Dear God, it's me, Jenna. Olivia. Please check the idea of a live concert version of The Prince of Egypt into the hearts and minds of DreamWorks executives. Amen. The Hebrews walking past the audience reminds me of when my friend played Timon in our high school production of The Lion King, and she and Pumbaa were able to pass around heart-shaped confetti to the audience during Can You Feel the Love Tonight? That was a hyena, so I wasn't able to do that.
There's one final thing I must do in Egypt. Perhaps you should go.
I'll just jog over there real quick. It'll be about a 50-day round trip, but don't worry, babe, I'll be right back. Moses and Zipporah have a standoff with Ramesses and Hotep, and guys, this is wrong. This is wrong. Moses is willingly giving himself up to save his people, while Ramesses is debating to kill him and the Hebrews, with Hotep behind him going, "Do it." I don't see the point in making Hotep a secondary villain. Well, more so than he and Hoy were. Hotep, Eddy, and even to some extent Nefertari constantly being little devils on his shoulder rips him away of any chance of being able to think for himself. Oh hey, Daddy's calling.
Are all my worst fears coming true? Honor your father, take your vengeance!
Ramesses struggles with gaining his agency until the very last second when he remembers, oh right, I have the most powerful position in my kingdom. Did anyone in this production realize how stupid this is?
No! I've come to end this.
So let me get this straight. Ramesses lets the Hebrews go. For realsies this time, willingly, I'm not kidding you.
There's a way of honoring the past without being trapped.
There will be a change at court when we return.
Ugh, this is such a cop-out. Instead of his grim Oedipus-esque downfall where he ends by flying too close to the sun by drowning his entire army, being impaled by the sword of Damocles that is his father's traditionalist ideals, rolling up a boulder that is the burden of his broken relationship with his brother, or whichever Greek mythology reference you want to use, he makes amends with Moses and they tie it off with a nice little bow. They hug it out because, you know, they're bros. Oh, and you know how I said the movie super vaguely implies the queen died? I guess the musical is doing the same thing with how she's dressed in pure white like Seti and Yocheved. They even killed off poor Jethro. Oh no! With Ramesses getting a redemption arc, we still need some villain defeat, so let's just have Hotep storm the Red Sea with the Egyptian army anyway. Sure, why not? Obviously they're defeated within seconds. The stage tilting is neat, I guess. Moses and Ramesses share one last duet calling back to footprints on the sand.
One day we will vanish like footprints on the sand.
But gone is a heart-wrenching heartbreak and Ramesses' ambiguous emotions. A man who is either furious at the loss of his legacy and his slaves slipping through his fingertips at the hands of Moses, mourning the loss of his brother, one who once meant everything to him, or some twisted, complex amalgamation of both. Well, I give this musical a bittersweet ending. Am I right? No. No. And with that, that's the end of The Prince of Egypt, the musical. Well, I'm happy for the cast, though. It definitely looks like they had fun. I've come to accept the fact that if I make a video about The Prince of Egypt, it's going to end up being an hour long. It's an adaptation of my favorite movie of all time, so I'm always going to find some joy in the music and characters. Although I like the expansion on ones like Zipporah, Yocheved, and Queen Tuya, giving us original songs like Dance to the Day, Footprints on the Sand, and For the Rest of My Life, and One Week Link and Heartless. Out of context. Standout performances from Christina Lotto, Mercedes Sampi, Luke Brady, and Debbie Corrupt, and fleshing out Moses and Zipporah's relationship, even if it comes at the cost of cutting some of my favorite moments from the movie, I suppose. But the iterations of the original songs range from mediocre to holding up decently well, with the questionable absence of Hans Zimmer's motifs like the burning bush, absolute bizarre costume design, and downright baffling narrative and character changes. The musical in general loses so much of the unique and staggering visual language the film provided. At the very least, they could have added some columns with hieroglyphs on it, and to think both the playwright and lyricist were involved in their respective departments for the original film. What the heck happened? I grew to love the cast recording during quarantine, but understanding its full context now makes it weaker as a result. I'm not upset it exists. I believe it was an earnest but misguided attempt to bring the animated epic to stage. Take away all the visuals and leave the cast recording out of context, and you have yourself a pretty decent soundtrack. Besides, I love when DreamWorks acknowledges the existence of this movie, ever since they went down the Shrek route when producing animated movies. Will this lead to a Road to El Dorado musical next or something? I'd pay good money to see that. As of now, there's no news to a US production or even tour, but if I had the chance to see it, I'd take it. I'd take any opportunity to see anything Prince of Egypt related in person. I've never even seen the animated movie in theaters. It's not my fault I was -5 years old when the movie came out. Is a 6 out of 10 rating for this too forgiving considered how critical I was toward it? Perhaps. I even brought it down from a 7 out of 10 because of how critical I became while writing this script, so at this point I believe the cast recording is better than the musical itself. I've watched it twice while creating this video after my first initial viewing, so I think I've had my fill. I'll still listen to the soundtrack by itself, though not as often as the animated one, in which both are in a Spotify playlist of mine that has over 800 likes for some reason. Aside from that, there's not really anything in the characters or narrative that's worth revisiting compared to something like Hunchback's additional songs and better handling of the original film's tone issues. You know, I was not expecting to make this many Road to El Dorado references in this video. Anyway, would I recommend this? I may have spoiled the whole thing, but yeah. I mean, not to someone who hasn't seen the original movie, of course not, because if you have not watched it, what are you doing with your life? But if you adore the animated film as much as I do and you're curious about the concept of the Prince of Egypt live on stage, then why not? It barely reaches the heights of its counterpart, but if you are willing to overlook its many flaws, it's serviceable and you could get at least one original song out of it. At the end of the day, theater's a different medium, so I would gladly take a pro shot over some soulless live-action remake in a heartbeat.